The Medal of Honor acquisition was very profitable for EA. The first game was a hit during the acquisition, and this meant that EA had a potentially fruitful franchise on their hands. This resulted in them greenlighting several sequels that released on console, PC, and even handhelds. While the franchise was receiving love from its fanbase along with seeing success, there was this underlying feeling that maybe all of these constant releases would start to cause oversaturation. There is something to be said for leaving some time between releases, to allow the audience to start to miss it and then be eager to run back into it. At the same time, Medal of Honor tried something different with Rising Sun, and shifted the action towards the Pacific Front. While still a beloved and largely underrated entry within the franchise, it did not see the success of the prior titles and was seen as a failure. As a result, the developers shifted back towards a more familiar territory for their next entry. Join me as we take a look back at Medal of Honor European Assault. Medal of Honor had largely spent most of its time presenting the major battles and locations in Europe during World War II. There were some exciting diversions as well to the African front. After the success of Frontline, the developers wanted to go in a completely new direction for the franchise. The plan was to create a game that focused on the Pacific Front. This would allow the studio to present the Battle of Pearl Harbor along with how the Japanese fought very differently than the Germans. The goal was to provide a freshness to the franchise to get the audience excited for another entry. When Medal of Honor Rising Sun released, it was not to the same success that the franchise was used to. While the game was beloved by many, it did not hit the sales numbers that the publisher wanted for the project. The developers were in a bit of a tricky situation. They had a direct sequel for Rising Sun that would act as a part 2 for this story, but due to the poor sales, Rising Sun's sequel was cancelled. The developers got to work on a brand new entry. From a gameplay perspective, they wanted to retain the balance of the realistic setting with the entertaining action. Along with this, the studio wanted to expand the level design that was explored a bit in Rising Sun, and go further with this in this new entry. In addition to this, the developers shifted their attention back towards Europe, and this resulted in the next project being called Medal of Honor Dogs of War, and then changed to European Assault.
I've come to realize that there's nothing good about war, but there is good in why you fight wars. And we were all fighting for the same thing.
The developers described their prior entries as a roller coaster on a single track. Rising Sun explored with some open levels, and European Assault was described as a theme park, allowing the player with a lot of options and player choice in what they tackled. The levels would be filled with lots of enemies and objectives to complete, but it would be up to the player to choose which ones to complete first. Each mission would consist of a main objective and then several secondary objectives to complete. The goal wasn't to stuff the levels, but rather provide options and infuse an element of player choice that was not seen in the series. The developers had received feedback on their prior titles that players would try to open up every door within their prior games and explore, but those games were built as linear experiences. European Assault would promote exploration and reward the player with upgrades. European Assault would feature other smaller mechanics like being able to pick up any gun on the ground, along with being able to look down your sights and then lean. In addition to this, the games allowed the player to kick grenades back at the enemy. Again, the studio would work with military experts and veterans to ensure that the game presented its action authentically for the player. Many of these experts had worked on prior titles within the franchise, and enjoyed how the series showed respect for those who had served, and provided a commitment to historical accuracy, realism, and authenticity. This collaboration resulted in making a new gameplay feature for the combat. They wanted to create a mechanic that would allow the player to go above and beyond what they were capable of. This resulted in the adrenaline system. As the player killed enemy soldiers, they would build up a meter and then could unleash it to give them a huge advantage in combat. While in this mode, the player cannot take damage and everything moves in slow motion. Some of these same experts were even included in the game as characters for the player to fight alongside with. Medal of Honor European Assault was both trying to push the series in a new direction mechanically, with the use of a more open level design offering more player choice than what was seen in prior entries, while at the same time taking the conflict to a familiar setting and showing different areas and battles from the European theater. In June 2005, Medal of Honor European Assault was released to the world. Medal of Honor European Assault is a first-person shooter that tries to change up some elements from the series. For the most part, the action is still solid and enjoyable in this title. At its best, the levels offer some appreciated exploration and a larger scope than before. Side missions can be discovered, and in some cases you will have multiple paths to go in. The downside is that many of the new elements can feel a bit half-baked here, along with being easily gunned down even on your normal difficulty setting. There are even some questionable arcadey elements that are fun to use, but do not necessarily fit into the series. European Assault is a flawed but very fun game. European Assault controls very similar to the prior console entries. There are some nice additions. Now the game will let you aim down your sights. While in this view, you can lean left and right along with over cover. This allows you to fire safely from cover and pick off enemies a lot easier. Another small addition is how you can prone. My only issue with this is how you need to double tap the crouch button to prone instead of holding the button down. And you need to use the jump button to go up from prone to crouch. This is an odd configuration for this. The newest addition to the game is the use of an adrenaline meter. This will fill up as you take out enemies, and it will fill up faster with headshots. Once the bar is full, you can switch it on and you will not take any damage, along with being able to do more damage and have unlimited ammo all in slow motion. This is really fun to use as you obliterate the opposition. My main issue with this is how it doesn't really fit the tone and setting of a Medal of Honor game. Medal of Honor has presented realism in its authenticity while providing a fantasy of being a special ops agent in World War II. This adrenaline meter feels more suited for a completely different game. Having said that, it is an enjoyable feature, just one that probably doesn't belong in this series. One small addition that I like is how you can kick thrown grenades. Most of the first-person action is really good and provides the expected quality that you would want in a Medal of Honor title. The gun sounds are great with satisfying reload animation along with good enemy deaths. I found myself relying a lot on playing this game entry a lot slower than I would any of the other prior console entries. European Assault wants you to use the cover unless you have your adrenaline meter full. This results in a mixture of a slower experience for the main combat, and then allowing for some run and gun action with the use of your super meter. There are some other changes as well, like how you can command a squad with some light mechanics. You can tell your men to go to a certain position or return back to you. The health system is a bit different as there are still health pickups to heal you instantly, but you can also find medkits and use them whenever you need them. European Assault does not feature mid-mission saving like in Rising Sun. Instead, you will have a certain amount of lives and you will earn more as you complete side missions. Once you die, you will lose all of your adrenaline and then respawn right back where you died. This can cause some frustration if you were just flanked, and now you could take damage again right when you get back up. Respawning to a spot away from the fighting may have been a better way to implement this. I will elaborate a bit more on the issues with European Assault a bit later, but first I want to praise how this game tackles its levels. The structure to the missions are a bit different than they were in the prior entries. Here they are more open, providing you with different paths to complete your objectives, along with side objectives to complete. A good amount of these levels feel like mini sandboxes where you can tackle many of the objectives in whatever order you want. The side missions are not given to the player, they are discovered, so you are rewarded for exploring the map along with finding additional supplies. Some levels offer less exploration and feel more like a narrow hallway to complete, but the best of the missions really give you that room to tackle the map how you want to. And since completing secondary objectives gives you more lives, lives. You are going to want to try and find all of these in a level. The second level, along with the first mission in Africa, being good examples of this done really well. The first level in Africa gives you a wide space where you can opt to tackle the map from the left or the right. Then you reach a point where you can fight within the trenches or fight below the bunkers. Essentially, it feels like they took what they did with the bigger environments and different paths in Rising Sun and expanded upon them here, providing more options to the player, and this is definitely the best aspect about this entry. Most of the missions consist of you starting out with a squad, but there is one mission within a bunker where you are alone. One of the side missions has you rescuing prisoners, and as you rescue them, they join your squad. This is a nice way to change up the established structure and have you actively building your crew in this level. This is also one of the first Medal of Honors to really touch on the conflict in Russia, and there is a great level where you need to work to capture a church, and then once you capture it, you need to defend it. When it comes to the story, it takes a more traditional approach, rather than the more personal attempt at storytelling in Rising Sun. We are treated to war footage mixed into what appears to be a veteran recounting his events from the war, and then we get some CGI cutscenes setting up the next set of levels. I do miss the old narrator for the briefings, but what is presented is standard and pretty enjoyable. When European Assault is at its best, it provides environments that are fun to explore with rewarding exploration along with engaging combat and excellent sound effects. There is plenty of fun to be had in this entry, but it also has a decent amount of flaws. In each of the stages there are bosses you need to take out. These are essentially just bullet sponge enemies, and they are really annoying and not fun to fight. For one, they soak up a lot of bullets, and these types of enemies really don't belong in a realistic setting like in Medal of Honor. They also act the same, so once you have experienced one of these fights, you've experienced them all. I do like how European Assault lets you control a squad, but this element could have been more polished and feel less half-baked than it is here. Many times you will direct your soldiers to a position and they will not listen to you. In other cases, they will get in your way and make the shooting hard. I wish the game had a system of suppressing the enemy with your soldiers and then you working to flank the enemy, or something to that effect. Overall, this feature is neat, but it feels tacked on. I do like how many of the levels offer a bit of exploration, but I feel like it was a missed opportunity to not allow you to choose your own loadout before each mission, adding more player expression into each of the levels. It seems like a feature like this would have been a good fit for this design. Then there are some smaller issues with the same button being used for reload and then using a medkit to heal one of your allies. Since they stay really close to you, I've accidentally used a medkit when I only meant to reload. In one level, my AI teammates disappeared and then reappeared at the end of the level, and sometimes they just walk right through the ground. And lastly, I do not understand why the developers took out the bots from the multiplayer that were introduced in Rising Sun. I love that they were included because they allowed the multiplayer to be preserved forever. European Assault is a lot of fun, but it comes with a lot of baggage, with some half-baked execution in some areas. This feels like a title that could have benefited from another year in development to really polish off the experience. Before we move to the conclusion, I want to praise the soundtrack, especially the main theme for this entry. Here are a few tracks from the game. Medal of Honor European Assault is a flawed but fun game. The open environments offer exploration along with side missions, and these are great additions to the series. The gunplay is still enjoyable and the sound effects are really good as well. But then there are several areas where the game could have benefited from more time to enhance the execution or just polish off the game. The squad mechanics was a cool idea, but the implementation of them feels half-baked, along with the AI being really bad. These AI have a tendency to not listen to your commands or outright disappear during a level to only reappear later on. The inclusion of the adrenaline meter was a cool idea from a gameplay standpoint, and it is satisfying to blow away several enemies with ease, but this does not fit in this series. Medal of Honor is grounded in its realism, but this very much goes against it. It is a fun mechanic that belongs in another game. Thankfully, European Assault is mostly enjoyable as long as you can stomach some of the flaws along the way. Thank you very much for watching.